welcome to the Swiss Re's Centre for Global Dialogue. We have a panel discussion here where we're going to explore the future of reward. What does reward mean? Why might it need to change? And how do we get from where we are to where we might be? This is a panel being run by TR2050. TR2050 stands for Total Rewards 2050. So it's a forum that's exploring the future of reward, that's convening a bunch of experts in reward who are across the globe, across sectors, and we are collectively looking at seeing how we can adapt reward for the future world of work. On this panel, we've got on my left here Mark Glaser, who's from Lonza in Switzerland, Maria Litvin, who is from the GFG Alliance in Dubai. We've got Max Papping from Leaseplan from the Netherlands. We've got Olaf Lang, who's from Swiss Re, who's very kindly hosting us here at the Centre for Global Dialogue. And finally, we've got Fermin Diaz from the National University of Singapore. So thank you very much, guys, for being here with me today. My name is Ben Shenoy. I'm a visiting professor of psychological and behavioral science at the London School of Economics. And what we're doing here is, in the context, let me set the context very briefly. Reward has been stable for decades. These guys can tell us that. But what's changing is the world of work. Look at societal trends, look at technology, look at organizational models. All of that is putting stresses on our existing reward models. So what in this panel we're going to do is explore how reward might need to change to adapt to this evolving world of work. So let's start, and Mark, if I may start with you. Does reward need to change? And if so, why?
Thanks, Ben. So from my perspective, I believe that reward does need to change. I think on the basis of what you already mentioned, mega trends that are influencing organizations on a global basis, but also on a local level. I think there are elements, be it demographic changes that are taking place that we need to reflect within the organization, and also from a reward dimension. I think also today we spoke about the further personalization or individualization of reward. So those are trends which we as organizations reflecting upon reward need to incorporate, and thereby also begin to reflect and also consider how we may want to adapt them going forward.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Maria, what would you like to add to that?
I absolutely agree. And I guess I would like to add to Mark's point as well, that rewards need to change into more flexible way, into a more flexible approach on not necessarily how we design it, but also how we deliver it. Thankfully, we have plenty of, like technologies right now on offer on the market. And the reason we need to do it is, in my opinion, and what I'm seeing right now in my organization, is a much stronger competition for talent across all industries. We do find ourselves not competing for talent across the steel industry any longer. So we do want to adjust and to flex up on our reward packages to make sure that we can be appealing to someone else from financial services sector who might want to join us, or tech sector. So there is definitely a major change and major shift that has to happen. Might not happen, in 1 year or a couple of years, but we are here to discuss the future of the world. So I absolutely think that the change is upon us.
Great. Thank you, Maria. And we'll come back to this point about the path we might take and how long it'll take and how we get to a 2050 future. Max, if I may, what specific pain points are you seeing that might push us towards needing to change the existing reward models we have?
Good question. I think what I see in my day-to-day work is that there's a huge amount of complexity in what we're currently doing. Yeah. And the world is changing so quickly. The workers, the expectations of workers is changing very quickly as well. Cross-border work, they want to be in different locations, having different experiences, and we're not flexible, agile enough to support those changes and to support those desires and things that the employees expect from us.
Great. Thank you, Max. Olaf, can I build on what Max said? And he talked about the expectations of workers. Which workers? Is this a Gen Z or Gen Z thing, or is this others who you're seeing who are putting pain in your reward model?
Thanks for the question, Ben. So I think the key point here is that we have been running rewards in a static way over the last, let's say, 2 generations. So with a 4 elements model: base salary, bonus, long-term benefits. Now the world changes, the workforce changes in our organizations. We have permanent full-time employees, we have part-timers, we have gig workers, we have post-retirement workers, all kinds of different types of people helping us achieving our goals. And they have different expectations towards rewards. A post-retirement worker doesn't need a huge pension or benefits plan, just to give you an example. So we need to shape and model the rewards packages more towards the expectations and needs of those distinct groups of employees. So I think some companies, the more agile ones, are starting, but this is at least a midterm journey. I would love to say, we need to be agile and quick, but I would think that needs some time until this really comes into force.
Great. Thank you, Olaf.
But maybe if I can
please.
just build on that, I think there are 2 elements. One is certainly the COVID pandemic period, which I think accelerated this. And then more holistically, also looking that our workforces are becoming much more diverse, also from industries, right? So I think we're beginning to hire individuals, be it from a digital angle or from other financial services, even into the pharmaceutical industry, or I think from a steel industry, right? So I think that diversity is also further accelerating the need for us to begin to reflect upon the structure of compensation, your classic base incentive, short-term and long-term, into something which is much more appealing to the candidates, but also to our employee base, which again is changing.
Exactly, Mark. So I think, good point, technology accelerates this, journey towards a more fragmented workforce. So the ability to work from home or from your ship in the Caribbean, drafting their marketing plans and it to your client, hasn't been here 20 years ago. And those developments we see more and more, and that is something we have to take into account when we talk about how the future of rewards will look like. Now, my example from the guy sitting on his yacht in the Caribbean is maybe exaggeration, but it shows you where it can go and where it might go in the long term, and that's something we have to take into account.
Great.
Do you think that there's sufficient infrastructure now currently to support that international work and those different relationships? So struggling with social security, insurances, all those sort of things?
So I think 2 aspects. In terms of technological infrastructure, I think we have that. Now, there was a fear when COVID started, do we have enough capacity to have all people working from home? Do our servers, Can
they cope?
Yeah. Exactly,
yes,
cope
yes.
with that. Now, that's here. But in terms of a reward-specific infrastructure, I think there is still a way to go. I don't see, at least from what I can see, that everything we need is already here.
Yeah. Great.
And that's interesting. I would like to draw on your point about basically flexibility. And right now, even though we're discussing rewards, sounds like what we are trying to offer on top of foundational standardized compensation and benefits packages is that element of flexibility, such as if we are competing for the same talent and you're offering someone to work from a yacht in the Caribbean, they'll perhaps choose to work for you instead of me, who'll say like 5 day a week office
Everything
time,
else
isn't
being
it?
equal,
So,
yeah.
and that one is a non-cash element to it as well.
So this is really interesting because it points to a very different perception or meaning of what value means to a potential employee or worker. Fermin, if I may come to you, we've talked about technology here, and technology is really interesting because it sounds like from what these guys have said, there's something around it driving change, but also potentially it might enable change in the reward space. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, a lot of people seem
aspects.
concerned that if we want to add flexibility to our pay systems, for instance, that we can't cope, we can't manage. But that rests on the same premise of we've been paying, like Olaf said, the same way for 2 generations. We've been paying payroll for the same way for the same amount of time. We need to move. When we designed flex benefits 30 plus years ago, it was the same argument. Oh, it's too complicated. Eventually, software comes up that will help us do the job. We will have to come up with ways to get the job done. We cannot allow lack of current technology, so to speak, to be the one obstacle that we can't overcome. That makes us too administrative of a function. We need to figure out what is needed and then what is the tool that we need to build to make it happen.
Great. And just to give us some shoots of the possibilities, can you think of an example of even the direction we might be taking in a case? You can think of someone who's
Well, everybody
playing
talks
with
about
this.
the same case, which is the one that most people know about, which is Unilever created this product called this methodology called UFlex, that now is marketed as a separate company called UFlex Rewards. I'm not a sponsor for the company, nor do I have any shares. I want to declare full disclosure here. No kickbacks, no commission. But that's where we need to go, whether it's that particular system or systems that do the same kind of work. The technology is there. It's actually not terribly complicated when you think about it. It's just keeping track. I'll go further than that, Ben. We are already in our companies paying people in different ways. We just don't do it out of the same place. So we hire gig workers and pay them through procurement. And then we hire consultants and pay them through finance. And then we hire part-timers and full-timers and pay them through HR. So we are already doing this. We're just not doing it in a concerted effort. So yeah, I don't think technology is the obstacle here. I think it's our ability to bring all of these different elements together, the flexibility that Maria was talking about, and how do we make a cohesive whole out of it? If you're going to have an employment of full-timers, part-timers, gigs, and whatnot, how do you bring harmony to this? How do you bring a cohesive system that allows you to ensure that you have the right performance, that ensure that you have the right culture, and that you have equity in the system? These are, I think, more important than technology for the future of pay.
Great. Thank you, Fermin. You've clearly outlined between you the case for change, right, in your answers. So I want to move on now to the next topic about drivers of change. What are the big drivers? You've touched on this, but I want you to expand on this a little bit. So, Max, what do you consider, from what you've seen, the biggest drivers of change, the biggest things that will move?
I think employee desire, the behavior of employees wanting something different, not settling for one specific thing, wanting to have that flexibility. My challenge is offering that flexibility. And like you said, we shouldn't have technology block us, but the technology is not there yet to make it fully operational for people. So I think my biggest challenge is that the employees probably want a little bit, they're ahead of the curve, and we're trying to catch up. And then it's you need to keep your direction, and you need to make sure that you keep your path of implementing the things that you want to implement. Otherwise, you're sort of constantly behind the facts.
And behind this, is there a concern on your part about talent shortages, labor shortages? Is that what's driving it, or is it just a general frustration on the part of employees?
No, the labor market is changing, and you do see that even in high inflation, high cost, there is still enormous demand for people and good people. I see it in my own team. If somebody leaves in my team, it's very difficult to replace them. So you want to make sure that people are motivated and engaged and supported by what they want from a company.
Okay, great. Thank you,
I
Max.
should absolutely
Please,
agree.
Maria.
I think that there is a so the main driver is talent, right? Like, so reward is there to support talent, to attract, to retain. And in the end of the day, for us, for example, for our industry, and I'm sure that you all guys experience the same, is so automation. So what sort of jobs are going to change? If they do change, how do we reward? How do we structure the reward? And most importantly, how do we transition from point A till point B in a manner that we continue to retain and keep the workforce engaged while going through the transition? And the second one, I do see that especially younger generation perhaps is looking for a bit more purposeful jobs. So, for example, at GFG Alliance, we were lucky enough to be in a sector that can basically deliver change and become, we are committed to become carbon neutral as well by 2030. So we are trying to build upon this and offer something a bit more unique and perhaps a bit more competitive for those who would like to come to work for us for a purpose rather than just a simple foundational box.
Just to build on that, what you just said, Maria, and also you, Max, I think there is a whole range of stakeholders out there, and the workforce being one of those, who have expectations on how reward systems should look like in terms of design, in terms of elements, in terms of disclosure. And I think the art is to, be aware of all those expectations and bring them together and build a cohesive, to your point, a cohesive system out of it. Yeah. That's not that easy. So you have workforce, just what you said. You have senior management, you have the exco, you have board, you have shareholders, you have proxy advisors, you have the media, press, all kinds of, and they all have probably, well-justified expectations, and to bring those together and build something out of it is sometimes quite a complicated task to fulfill.
Communicate about it so that people understand it.
Exactly.
What you're offering.
Exactly.
You could have a very nice package, but if nobody knows what you're offering and why you're offering it, it's in vain.
But at the same time, you see, the employees, the candidates, they have a very clear understanding of what they want. And can we deliver against it? So, and the issue that we're having is that what this very collective they, is not uniform at all. We already understand the demographics that different people in different life circumstances want different things. But also we are finding that this changes a lot, individual to individual, and it could easily be that some people would prefer to work 80% of the time for 80% of pay, as opposed to 100% of the time for 100% of pay, but still get full benefits. So can we accommodate things like that? And the workforce is changing in that direction. The other thing I think is adding to this complication is that the shortage is not necessarily of employees, but of skilled employees.
So it's interesting, coming back to Max's point, it sounds like there are pockets of shortage of particular skills.
But it changes, you see, because now we have ChatGPT-4. So now we need a whole new type of worker that didn't exist last year, about prompt engineers. Okay? Last year, that term didn't even exist. This year, now we're all looking for this kind of person.
And how do you reward them?
And how do you reward them? And where is the salary survey that tells me how much these people get paid? So we have to create things as we go along, because the kinds of skills that we need keep evolving at a speed that sometimes is faster than our ability to generate solutions.
Great. I want to pick up on Olaf's point about stakeholders. And Mark, I know you want to say something. In fact, why don't you say it?
Well, no, I was just...
I'll get back to the question.
I think we need to go back to the essence, right? The employee. Right? And I think that's what we sort of touched upon, but I think what we're beginning to recognize is that a worker will have and go through different phases in their life. And with that, they will very simply have different needs. I think we've touched upon it, but I think it's something we should really reflect upon because, at the beginning of your career, you will be maybe more flexible, right? At a later stage, you may be seeking out other benefits. Later on, you're looking for greater flexibility in terms of maybe not working as many hours as you mentioned. But I think the essence of also reward is going back to the actual employee. What is the employee? What is the colleague seeking? And how do we best address that, right? And I think let's listen to them.
It sounds like you're saying we shouldn't lose sight of this.
No, this is a super important point.
Within all the
When we talk
complexity of
about
what
the
we're dealing with.
stakeholders, when we talk about the stakeholders, this is our main stakeholder in the
The
end.
primary stakeholder.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the essence, right? Without them, there's nothing.
I would say it's one of various. I mean, it's of course maybe the most important one, but it's not the only one. And whatever we do in the end has to make economically sense for the company. We have to make a profit at the end of the year. Otherwise, we are not any longer in the market in 5 years' time. So completely agree. We have to make sure we attract and retain the people we need with the skills we need. But from a broader perspective, this has to make economically sense for us as a company and for us as a society.
Yeah, and that's the point I wanted to raise as well, is how do we find synergies between business affordability and those moments that matter, and us adjusting the sort of like flexible packages to those moments? Because in the end of the day, right now, you might disagree, but I think flexibility is a bit of a luxury. It is expensive. Technology is expensive. So it's a lot of work that we need to place into delivering something that flexible, and then can actually our business, right, especially right now, I mean, times aren't the best, right? Like, can we afford it?
And there's still
Fair point.
It's a valid point. There needs to be an ROI discussion because there are the decision makers that need to agree. And so even though flexibility sounds like a luxury, it may be a need that is expensive and it still needs to have an ROI. Yes.
So really interesting points here, right? We've got a primary stakeholder, we've got other stakeholders, we've got competing interests, right? We've got conflicting goals. So I want to move us on to the idea of barriers and blockers. So this, what are the challenges to this? So let's see, Maria, what do you consider to be the biggest obstacles to this change happening?
Yeah, I think building a business case that is sufficient enough to make all the involved decision makers and stakeholders to see a long-term value in this. I do not think that we are right now, and I don't speak actually on behalf of my company, I speak on behalf, I think, of the world, that we right now have enough empirical evidence that suggests, all right, flexibility of rewards will be able to deliver the value A, B, C, will increase retention by 40%, etc. It's relatively new concept.
Yeah.
They have an ideas, and we need to test them. But then testing is also expensive because you need to basically change sometimes, your outlook on rewards 180 degrees. Because we are right now, for example, we are quite traditional industry, right? There is, steel making, and we just pay salaries, we pay bonuses. We are a limited company, so we don't really have any share-based awards. So it's, what is my value add and how can I calculate it, and to basically gain buy-in to say, look, in 5 years, I'm definitely going to bring like so much value. So I think like I do have reservations about like, how do I build a case?
Just to build on what Maria said, so from what I've seen in my career, which is now a couple of years old already, that big MNCs, I think, are reluctant to change by nature. They like stability, and with all kinds of arguments. It's costly, it creates turmoil, it creates uncertainty, and I've seen many places where change is not welcome as such. And to convince the board, the senior decision takers that this is necessary and it's necessary to invest money to enable change, I think is an important task which we as professionals need to embrace, right?
So this is a challenge for the reward community, right? And building on this idea of blockers.
But I think, sorry, if I might add actually to your point, but I think, I strongly believe that actually building a business case, that if, let's say, all of us MNCs agree on a change, we as an organization wouldn't want to lay behind, right? Like, and then
fear of
miss out,
missing out.
missing out, right?
The point is, if others do it,
If
we
we
want to
are doing it.
But do we want to be the first movers? Not that often.
I would like you to test, the theory, and then we'll implement it if
It's
it
also
works.
sometimes marketing, because I see there's this music streaming services that says you can work from everywhere. Well, everywhere where we have a job and a vacancy. So staff comes to me and says, Max,
I want to work from anywhere.
I want to work from everywhere. And then we try to facilitate. But if you don't dive into the details of that other offer, you think that everyone has worked this out, this difficulty, and we're struggling. But in fact, we are now a little bit ahead of the rest.
So this idea of marketing is interesting, right? Because there's if you like, there's a state of actual real practice, and there's a state of the art, and there's always a slight gap between the promise and the reality. Mark, you wanted to say something?
Well, no, I think just building on what Max, you were saying, I think as a function, often, right, we are quite, dare I say, conservative or static, right, in terms of we build a structure, be it from a job evaluation. When we look at what type of data are we looking at? We're looking at the median, right? We're looking towards that. So that by itself, I think, is becoming a hindrance for us as a function to naturally push the boundaries of what is possible. And I think that's where, what is key, I think, as professionals, that we, support the business, and therefore really seek to enable the business. And I think that enablement of the business becomes really the key element. It's not necessarily our tools, but it's actually looking at what the business is seeking to achieve and thereby support them, so that we latch on, we push, but it's not necessarily something
and
which
support,
is coming.
yeah.
Exactly.
So the reality is that none of us knows the answer per se, because it's true, there aren't enough use cases out there to say, oh, there is now a best practice. But somebody's got to start. I think part of what TR2050 is about is this is the group that will get it started, so that we will create those use cases. Now, what will it take? I agree with you. This is all complicated, it's hard, and you got to sell it to every stakeholder out there, and you need an ROI. But we still need to overcome some of these challenges. So who will be the one that will do the pilots? Who will be the one that will take some ideas? Because we have a business need. Let's not call it a case yet, but a need. We understand...
An emerging need.
Yes, we understand that the future of work is going this way. We understand that what employees are expecting is different. We understand all of that, and we need to address it. The reality is that we're still addressing this future of work with 50-year-old thinking. Somebody said earlier that we want cyber employees with Jurassic methods.
Yeah, 1930s methods.
So and you think about it some more. The area of recruiting has already moved ahead. They are doing AI to recruit, no problem. They have lots of analytics behind it. The area of training, they have all this on-the-go training, on-demand training. They have lots of ROI. The area of compensation, we have nothing new to offer. So we need to come up with what are the things that we need to do.
If I may, fully agree with you. We have to come up with this. But I also see the challenge that, for example, in recruitment, whenever there's a new vacancy, basically you can start your process, redesign your whole process from that vacancy and the next one. If you want to change things, you do it completely different if you want to. In reward, we have long periods of time, performance periods, 3-year long-term incentives. Our window of opportunity to change things is very, very small. We have the normal comp cycle, merit round, bonus round, all that sort of stuff. Then you have a couple of months in which you need to have the discussions, you can tweak, but a complete overhaul I think is very, very difficult to do. So that will take a number of iterations to change.
True. But I don't think that the recruiting people changed overnight either. I think it took them a number of years and a number of trial and error until they figured it out to the point where they are today.
But maybe just to build on the TR2050, I think what we can see and what we can experience is that each of the organizations that are contributing will have tested and can pilot small elements. And if we bring it together into one group, we actually see maybe a bigger opportunity. And I think that's the real benefit of coming
And if we
together
can learn from each other.
as a number of companies,
And
right?
we can learn
across
from each other. That's correct.
different industries, geographies, and the like, right? As an individual organization, it would be much too risky for us to undertake. But if all of us collectively, right, test a little bit, bring that together, then we are able to hopefully
We
move
manage
forward.
down the risk.
And it's almost like we mentioned today during one of our sessions is that like flexible rewards almost like becoming a new standard. So it's not something that differentiates us. It's actually like a homogeneous factor that is a new standard, and then we'll still be able to differentiate based on like our different culture and like what our organization offers from a broader like EVP perspective. So and I really liked, Herman, what you mentioned today as well about it. I think it all comes to a very simple question, like, do we see reward function as being active or proactive? And then if we do agree that reward has to become proactive, then we do have to start taking baby steps, but in anticipation of the future challenge.
So I want to pick up on Fermin, your point, and Mark, your point about TR2050 being an opportunity to try some of this stuff out, to build use cases, to collect data, to manage risk. We're conducting this panel during the think tank, our first face-to-face think tank here at the Center for Global Dialogue at Swiss Re. So if I may ask you guys as members, Olaf, let's start with you. Why is TR2050 important to you as a representative of Swiss Re? What's the value, potential opportunity and value you see?
So good question, Ben. I mean, for me, it's relevant because it's the only platform I know which brings together senior professionals from big international companies, researchers, academia, all working towards the same objective. And that is a unique chance we have to make something out of it. That's why I personally that's why I'm here. That's why I think it's important. That's why I think there's a good chance to create something in the end. Again, it's the only platform of that nature I know, and that's why I'm participating. And I think it's a lot of fun, actually.
Excellent. Thank you. Max, same question.
Well, I think it's big value for me is that it's not consultant driven. There's nobody trying to sell you something. And it's something, the next best thing, we now have this trend and you need to buy our product. We know how to deal with this. This is all practitioners of large companies that struggle with this and deal with this on a day-to-day basis. And it creates this network of trust
So
where you can
there's
share.
peers.
There's peers.
We can share experience. We can try stuff together. You're participating. You're not just listening.
And we're all deciding our own sort of path forward, of course, for our own companies and have those interactions with our own management and our own employees. But it's very good that I can say, hey, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. I have this contact. They have tested something. Let me get the details. Let me maybe see if we can set something up and have a conversation on this. What works, what doesn't work.
Excellent. Thank you, Max. Maria.
To me,
what's the value to you of TR2050?
Yeah, I agree with all the points raised, and I think to me there is one is I guess, and I mean, reward professionals sometimes have to be bad cops in organizations, right? Yes. And we have quite a lot of pain points that we all experience as well. So it's not actually hearing it from consultants, oh, I know what organizations are doing, you'll be able to confirm or deny some of the theories because I can ask you directly. And I think it's just the feeling of knowing that I'm not the only one who experiences difficulties with gaining leadership buy-in for some of the initiatives, or, for example, high turnover in this specific location, or problems with retention. So it's really nice to know that it's not perhaps something that our company is missing upon, but it's like market conditions, and we are right now all in the same boat, and we need to do something about it. So, guess
Great, thank you. Mark, same question to you.
I mean, I think it's largely already been mentioned, but I think one of the aspects is that we're looking at 2050, right? We're having that third horizon perspective also, right? Not only just looking at it over the, let's say, the next quarter or the next long-term incentive plan or 2030, which often resonates when we're thinking of ESG, but it's actually taking that next
Beyond our retirement.
beyond our retirement and thinking of the next generations, right? And
So
I
this
think
is legacy you're talking about.
it is, I think, the degree of legacy, right, for us within our respective organizations, but I think also for our function, right, our profession. And
So you're giving back.
it's a form of giving back, and I think to what was mentioned, just to reiterate, I think it is the practitioner as well as the academic, as well as the diversity from a geographic and the industry, bringing that together in an environment where it's safe, where we can have a dialogue and exchange, challenge each other, but also complement and take that risk and move that needle. And I think that's something which is, to Olaf's point, extremely unique. And at least I think we all have not seen something before.
Just to comment on one of your remarks, Mark, which are extremely true in a way. So it's, the whole thing is not about how can I improve my long-term incentive plan? What are the right KPIs? But it's more, the long-term view from an overall perspective. How can I, position rewards better so that, it contributes to the success of the company ultimately? What does it need to attract the right people? What does it need to, motivate them? How can I be flexible? And that's what I like. It's not technically, operationally, it's the long-term strategic view, which we, in our day-to-day business, often just don't have, because there's no time for it.
And I think one of the aspects, right, of the long term, I think we know it when we have introduced new plans or new instruments or even new benefits, right? It's not something that happens overnight. It's not normally within one session with the board of directors or the compensation committee, but it normally takes a number of cycles, a number of iterations. And I think this is, for us, it's not about an instrument, right, or specific plan, but it's actually looking at more the function holistically and sort of reward everything that it encompasses.
So this...
And for me, it's a bit of peer support.
Yes.
And the network that we all know collectively that we have an issue to address, and collectively we're going to try to find out the solution. And what's interesting is that we learn from each other, as opposed to we're all going to sit here and listen to somebody talk.
There are no tablets of stone, right?
And there is no truth about any of this, because all of it has to be discovered.
We have to
tested.
stumble
Yes.
to it collectively.
So this idea of collective learning, I think it's a beautiful thing.
So this point, Olaf, Mark, you've touched upon it, right? It's not just about here's a framework for 2050. It's the relationship between the reward function, the reward experts, and the business becomes different. It changes. The role reward plays in the success of the business and what it means to employees changes, is transformed. I want to thank you for those answers. Great work. I want to close by coming back to this TR2050. And I know we've talked about some of the drivers, we've talked about the challenges. I want to focus on the end state. And I want to just get your thoughts on where might this end up? So, TR2050, we're looking 30 years out, right? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but I'm fascinated to get, first question, again, I want to ask all of you, where might reward end up looking nearly 30 years out? Max, let's start with you. Easy question.
Easy question. Nearly 30 years. I think technology is changing so quickly now. And the impact of technology on the workplace is changing very quickly. It would be very hard for me to predict where it will end up. I think people will still need a appreciation to get engaged and to be engaged. appreciation, financial, non-financial. That will remain. I think the non-financial purpose, you see that growing now. ESG, those sort of topics are growing in importance. People want to be part of that movement for a company. I think shorter term, it's probably easier to sort of predict what's going to happen. More flexibility, and if it's up to me, a better packaging and communication, marketing of what it is that we offer already. Because I think there is some flexibility offered already, but not always seen as being flexible or supporting the mission of the organization.
Cool, great. Thank you, Max.
I
Maria.
think, I would like to add to your point. I absolutely agree. And I think that individual recognition will always be a key priority for us reward professionals. It's just about how the recognition for individuals will be delivered. Because if we're thinking about, I can suspect that maybe in 20 to 30 years from now, we will have maybe something as of long-term incentive-like plans, but across not executives only, but we perhaps would want to retain the future workforce for a longer period of time with some other reward instruments, but that wouldn't be the differentiator factor. The differentiator is individual recognition. And then the way we deliver it with all the technology in place, we might want to adopt tokenization, for example. You could be collecting points or tokens for something you have achieved throughout the year and exchange them afterwards for cash or non-cash, holidays, etc. So there could be, when we speak about flexibility and what can be flexed upon, it's very unlikely it will be salaries, to be honest, but the variable components and things we can recognize upon and the way we deliver it, I think will be a bit more interesting.
So this idea of tokens, and I don't know where you could even take into gamification, is sort of quite an interesting idea to play with. Mark.
I think besides what already has been mentioned, what I would hope is that it becomes a movement. It's a broader movement. Looking again to Max's point, where will it end? We don't know. I think if we knew, we wouldn't be sitting here, if I may say so, right? But I think it's more around a movement in terms of where do we want, as a function, as practitioners, as a diverse group, want to move the topics which are dear to us into the future. Right, and I think it builds a little bit on what I said earlier, what we also mentioned in terms of the legacy, right? Yeah. I think that's from my angle.
What's fascinating, Mark, about what you said about a movement is it suggests potentially an end state which is beyond reward. It's about what's the role of corporations in society, right, and citizenry. Yeah, which is,
and I think it builds on what Olaf mentioned earlier in terms of the different stakeholders. I think it also builds on what we spoke. Max just mentioned ESG, right? I think there are broader topics which we can influence, support, shape going forward, right? So indeed, it goes beyond sort of the.
But also vice versa. Those topics influence on us much more than they did in the past.
And I think that's again coming together as a diverse group is probably is a good way of trying to address it.
Tackle it. Yeah, Olaf.
I want to add one thought to the discussion. So we all don't know how the world in 30 years looks like. Crystal clear. No one has a crystal ball. But the one thing we know is that the workforce structure in 30 years is completely different compared to today. The point we had earlier. Yeah. And my hope, at least, would be that we develop systems which are able to meet the needs of all those different parts of the workforce. Gig employees, full-timers, part-timers, what have you. That's not the case today. We have it here and there, but not in a consistent way. And my hope would be that in the light of this changing workforce structure, we can develop systems which meet the needs best they can of what we will see in 30 years in the workforce.
Great, thank you. And Fermin, finally, what is your crystal ball?
I have a slightly different take, as you would expect. And to paraphrase a famous guy, I have a dream. My dream is that once we break away from existing mindset of pay for performance being the only way to structure pay, we will discover two broad avenues that we will then go down different paths, and it may not likely be a new path to replace the existing one, but several paths. So pay for development, pay for retention, pay for location, will become new ways that we can do this, and flexibility will become the standard and the norm as opposed to the exception. But the second part of the dream is that we will never again do what we still do today, which is we do this because that's the way everybody else does it, or we do this because that's the way it's always been done. We will get more analytical in the area of compensation, and we will begin to understand what drives performance from a pay perspective, what drives retention from a pay perspective, and we will start creating pay systems that have an ROI, clearly have an ROI. Not just it works for retention, but it has a return on investment.
So it's based on evidence, not precedent.
Correct.
Yes.
So in my mind, where it's going to go is more of a framework that says we will use analytics to understand how we can pay to drive the kinds of results we want, and we will follow different models that show to be successful at that particular company, at that particular point in time, and the willingness to change when the analytics tells us that it's no longer
and based
working.
on different individuals valuing different things.
Correct.
Right, great. So thank you very much for that. We've done a little bit of crystal ball gazing, visioning. I want to close with a final question, which is to bring it slightly close back, not too much close back. Just, I want you to go now to 2030, maybe a little bit more than less, or about 10 years time. What do you think might put in place over the next 10 years that will pave the way towards that future that you've described so articulately? What are your thoughts on this?
I think skills-based pay probably will become more prevalent. Yep. So if you're thinking about of all the flexibility in total remuneration, right, depending on what can we flex, what we can't flex, I think what the talent can flex upon right now is sort of that horizontal growth and a bit like non-traditional ways of being able to get more rewards for knowledge and for that potential in an organization. So, and we do know of organizations that are already testing that sort of methodologies. And I guess perhaps like if it works as it's promised to work, then more and more organizations would want to adapt.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Maria.
I think
Max.
A systemic approach to reward, the implementation of the technology to allow that flexibility, rather than ad hoc decision making on a exception that is difficult to execute on, but we felt it was really necessary.
You have to do it,
to do it.
Yeah.
Which creates an anomaly in your data, which cannot be explained. So I think that sort of structure, bringing things back into a structure that you can use as a basis to further develop the next steps for reward. So I think that's probably where the short term we probably focus on.
Excellent, thanks. Olaf.
Well, I would hope that we can increase the perceived value of rewards to employees by better understanding their preferences. So I'm not saying we want to pay more, but we want to get more bang for our buck. So paying the same amount of money, give or take, but increase the perceived value for the individual of what we spend. And that needs a better understanding of the preferences,
motivation,
the motivational elements, the performance elements. That would be my hope, that we achieve something like that in the next 5 to 7 years.
Okay, great, excellent. Thank you. Mark.
Maybe just building on Olaf, your point of value creation, I think what will also be critical is value capture. So how do we, in essence, as an organization, begin to capture the value through the engagement of our workforce, right? Again, building on the flexibilization, individualization of the rewards, the way that employees are able to engage around the information, right? Be it total reward statements, elements like that, but that we are able to capture as an organization, therefore, that type of value. And I think the second aspect, looking at 2030, I think we will see, or I hope that as organizations we begin to further embrace everything related to ESG. So both the environment, the social, as well as the governance aspects to that, as it is something which closely ties to be it organizational purpose, but also I think in terms of what broader has an impact on
Totally.
companies as well as us as individuals.
Yes.
But do you actually see ESG changing like pay mix or the way we deliver rewards? Because like, in my opinion, for example, I think ESG is, I mean, it's absolutely big for us, but the way we are looking at it, we are thinking of updating our KPIs and like our weightings and we thinking like sort of like how does it underpins our broader business vision. But the rewards itself, will it at all affect, for example, our reward structure?
I think it can. And again, I think this is where each organization will need to determine how they will want to embrace ESG and what that means for them and how do they interpret that into rewards instruments. So again, I think that's the reason why it's environmental, social, as well as governance. And organizations will themselves need to determine that. But I would hope and would anticipate that it will have an implication, right, as we're beginning to see.
What's fascinating about this, Mark, is the variation in how different organizations, their attitude to ESG and shareholder versus stakeholder capitalism suggests that there's going to be such a variation in the frameworks that different organizations craft to deal with their stance.
And some companies will comply.
Yeah.
And some companies will thrive in it. And this will be clearly
It'll be a
the
minimum
case.
versus this is a competitive
Clearly
advantage.
the case. And this is going to be more legislation driven in the main than it is going to be value driven. Some companies will do it for value, don't get me wrong, but in the main, it's probably going to be... For me, there are two things that I think are going to happen, and they are going to happen. The flexibility of the workforce. Forget about the flexibility of pay at this point. It's the flexibility of workforce. It's already on the way. And when we asked everybody around the table today how many of their employees will not be full-time employees, the perception is a quarter to a third of the employees will. So that's a material amount of people that we need to figure out how to pay. And we need to figure out how to pay in a way that we can maintain some of the principles that we have around equity and around culture and all of the things that are important from an HR perspective. So that's going to happen. Whether we tackle it now or later, whether we are in the lead or we follow, in 5 to 7 years' time, this will no longer be a topic of discussion. This will be something everybody is engaged in doing. But the second part is, as we then start to discover new ways to pay, we need to create these ROIs that Olaf was talking about. And these business cases that will include thinking about whether this way to pay is better than that way to pay. That level of analytics will also be part of what needs to happen, because we will need to change how we pay, and we will need to demonstrate to the shareholders and to other stakeholders why this is the better way to do it. So I don't think this is avoidable. This is where we're headed. 5 years, 7 years from now, this is exactly what's going to be happening. Now, who's going to lead? Who's going to follow? That's the question.
These are choices we can make, right? So thank you so much, all of you, for such a thought-provoking and stimulating discussion. I want to thank Mark Glaser, Maria Litvin, Max Papping, Olaf Lang, and Fermin Diaz. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Ben.